Hello and most welcome to Heidegger 931. It's a very lovely sunny day today. It's partly misty in the atmosphere, and I think there's a lot of condensation coming out. I would say it's about 17 degrees, something in that vicinity. And I will today talk about the past once more. I started with future a couple of days ago, but I discovered here in my own deconstruction, inspired by Rodolphe Gasset and of course Robert Magliola, that the past is even more rejected, even more an object of despise, marginalization, and it is the very epitome of the evil. The past is nothing but utter darkness. Compared with the dark Middle Ages or the dark period in Roman history, historical darkness is tradition. It is everything that our ancestors have lived through, and especially in my own country, Sweden, the epiphany of modernism. Tradition is something utterly despised, and none of the knowledge we have today in Sweden is taken to come from the past somehow. Well, one question that almost immediately, thanks to years of deconstruction, comes into place is, if it's not coming from the past, where is it coming from? It is actually, the answer, coming from the present. To cite my own teacher, it comes from eternal rational laws that are only present in the now, and you can access them. And you can also access what he called thing. I think that would be like objects or their definitions. So he was a pure Platonist, and I would say Platonism is like 99% of Swedish culture today. Everything of knowledge is out there. It is not something, and this is I heard many times before, even expressed, it's not something you can sort of learn by doing or experience. Experience doesn't add anything. It could be a special lower kind of knowledge possibly, but it's always lower. The real truth is somewhere else, in the transcendency, in these rational laws, where we do something much finer than experience. We derive truths, and we take them down like apples from the sky or from a tree or whatever. I think this is incredibly interesting, especially in Sweden. I think if you were speaking to an Englishman, you wouldn't hear it that directly. They would think it is something odd in saying such a thing, that things can come from nowhere and not having a history. No Swede will tell you the history of rationality. Maybe some will have like a dim idea that it didn't exist before, at least before the 19th century in Sweden, but it just came into existence without any pre-notice, and now it's here. And since now is the only thing that exists, rationality, according to this, doesn't need any past explanation. It's just here because it's always been here and always have been. That is the now. And I think that affected my odd turn of starting with the future a couple of days ago and not the past. If I were a little bit more correct, I would have started with the past. But everyone gets affected by that, everyone living in Sweden especially. But one thing to say directly about the future is there is nothing to learn in the future. There is no undertakings. the world is as it is today. So not even classical physical advances are really possible from some perspective. Everything is now. And I don't think I exaggerate that all Swedes says the knowledge we have today, that's the end of knowledge. Not maybe in a argumentational way, but in an emotional way. Because I never hear the argument. I heard it once, I think, from Christopher Penchak, the herbalist. He said actually, nobody knows where the science will be in 100 years. And he said that as a counter-argument to accepting that medicine is 100% correct. But emotionally, all Swedes think that the now is the only thing that exists. That also puts an incredible limitation to knowledge, because this is actually completely equal to the saying of Lord Kelvin that we only need a decimal and then all of physics is finished. But this is worse. We're talking about all strains of knowledge. We talk about knowledge as such, and that had stopped here. There is no progression. Maybe, I don't think it's a very exaggerated guess, why are so many young people in Sweden depressed? According to the latest inquiry, it was 30 to 35%. Well, it's no wonder if there is no progress, no development. And it's no wonder, since you get very strained by this nowness fanaticism, that there is no other way either. There cannot be any other way. The way that is now is the only valid way. All other ways are already tainted by absence, because we have perfected rationality now. Maybe we can put in a counter argument, and that is what most people do, but they don't act in a way differently, which I would argue in this lecture, that is going to come in two parts, is quite possible. And I would even argue in this lecture, I would go even further. I would be blasphemous to say that, yeah, listen now carefully. I will take the stance that was taken by Bishop in mathematics, when he said that all of mathematics have at one instance or another been constructed. None of mathematics has just sort of spring into reality by itself. And since I completely agree with constructivism, I would say that also goes with the rest of knowledge. Everything has either been experienced, constructed, done, been observed, like the hint we get from quantum mechanics. Not to be observed is not to be real, and that's the end of it. There are no counter-arguments in physics. Why would it be in the rest of the world? Do answer me that question. Why on earth would there be an exception in the rest of the world if physics, which is usually the subject in Sweden that everyone is pointing to when they say no, is the only thing that exists? When not even physics, the thing they're pointing to, accept that notion. In quantum mechanics, everything is in the past. If it's not observed, it doesn't exist. Therefore, there is no now existence. Yes, it's a radical medicine, and of course we don't have to be really that radical, but that is the saying from physics. And since they brought physics into the play, they had to eat that argument themselves. I would instead argue that a fanaticism that goes so far does not have natural causes. The nowness is not a mistaken idea of that that now could be the solution, an absolute rationality that we get out of nowness. We get consistency. Nowness do not allow undecidability. Everything is decided in the now. That's the whole idea of the now. You might remember the Necker cube. It changes all the time, like the Möbius strip or the Klein bottle. But if you sort of isolate a moment, the Necker cube won't change, because you say in this specific moment it is only one-sided, it's monosemic. So we need the now. Actually, the need of the now is already installed before even the search for now began, because we need only one meaning to have rationality. Many meanings, polysemy, doesn't work with consistency, something that Gödel showed. Well, we all, actually that's sort of false. Sorry, take that away. We know that before, but he only showed that to be the case in mathematics as well. Big surprise for everyone. Remember that. It was literally an incredible surprise for everyone on this planet. No one would have assumed that beforehand. No one. I would say this search for nowness is driven by emotional needs. It's a felt lack at everyone who's striving for that. That is the only reason. There can be no other reason for this, because it's a fanaticism. And fanaticism is always fueled by something that is intensely emotional and gives a huge impetus to go in a way that defies all thinking, defies the very idea of what it is to observe, to make something, and to start to talk about unmade things that already exist somehow. That absurdity, person can only claim that level of absurdity if there is already a complete lack within that person. An emotional lack, a lack in happiness, a lack in satisfaction, a lack in having their goals satisfied, which is incredibly important, but most people don't have that today. I would say for most people, the now is a pharmacon. It's a medication they strive for. In the now, they will get that pharmacon, their medication, and they will be healed once more. And this is not me being sarcastic or ironical. I would say this is exactly how it is. I felt it myself, I'm completely honest. I've been striving for complete awareness, complete nowness. That was my striving until recently. We all have that. This is already installed by the time we were born. This is not something we make up ourselves. But of course we can follow it in different degrees. If you have a lack, it is natural. Most people that die of thirst at sea is because they've been drinking salt water. They made salt water their pharmacon, their nowness, and it kills them. The reason why we are in the situation we are is because we wanted to get there. Rodolphe Gachot doesn't hesitate an instant. He doesn't say ever that logocentrism is a pure misconception. It's a thrust, it's a striving that is in some ways incredibly aware of what it wants. It is very persistent, it is very strong, and is shared by everyone. But I already talked about that, since now doesn't make any sense. They're all striving for different things. They could though go in the same directions, like lemmings. Lemmings, they gather in millions, sometime every 6 years, and they go all in the same direction. From the beginning, people thought this was some inborn suicide trait because they end up in the cliffs in some fjord and they throw themselves off the cliff to a certain death at sea. But it turns out that's not the case. It is when there are too many lemlings, they cannot have their own territory, and since they are extremely territorial, a fight begins, first in some place, and that spreads. And in the end, this effect makes them go in the same way. Chaos theory. It was never intended for them to go in the same way, and they all do it for different reasons. Not two lemlings go in the same direction for the same reason. Looks that way from a human perspective, but they're trying actually to defend their own territory. So they go looking for their territory somewhere else. And in the end, they are so caught up with a run, so they forget why they started. Lamlings don't have a long memory. We should have a long memory, and we should remember searching for nowness hasn't learned us anything. It hasn't gotten us anything. But that doesn't matter, since it's just now, there is no memory. Do you see the problem here? If you only live in the now, you will discard your memories. Modern man has a great problem accessing his or her memories. And there is a good reason for that. The only thing that can uphold the metaphysical presence is forgetfulness. And what is now except forgetfulness? You can't remember anything in the now. The whole past is gone. And the past, I claim, is the very source of all, bar none, all our knowledge. Everything comes from experience. Nothing comes from no experience. Well, that would be the Gestalt, but that is not knowledge in ordinary sense. And we can only have this much appreciated, much hailed thing of coherence and correspondence in an absolute now, because of the Necker cube, the Möbius strip, and so forth, and also because of actually what Gödel did. If you could divide the moments into singular moments, mathematics could, at least for that second or microsecond, be consistent until you do the next equation, until you reach the end, because you never reach the end. But you can stop the whole thing and you can almost say that mathematics is consistent. You see why consistency, non-paradoxality, non-contradiction, the law of the excluded middle also are things very connected to the now. Only in the now, this made-up thing, this pharmacon, can we construct consistency, coherence, and so forth, and rationality that doesn't come from anywhere. And I heard different criticisms, and I would say that the construction is the very best, because you can change your argument constantly, but you will show the very same thing. I heard it from social anthropology that the Human Declaration of the Declaration of Human Rights in the United States are a very Western thing. Well, it's based on rationality, not tradition. That in itself is a nowness search. But the more interesting thing, I would say, apart from this half-good counter-argument to the Declaration of Human Rights, I would say that to be the non-idea or the assumed thing or the gestalt, that rationality shared by everyone, the same rationality. So even in the United Nations, this gestalt is completely dominating whatever sort of assumptions you do. It has complete dominance, bar anything. And this is so pure rationality, it doesn't even have a name, it doesn't have a system, it has no history, it is like an orphan because it was never made. Not two parents met and made rationality. It is just out there. And just to question where it is ridiculous. Then you would be castigated. Just like Jacques Derrida was from Cambridge. Why is that? It was because he threatened the very foundation of Western thought. He would undermine rationality. And he would have made philosophy, linguistics, and literary science impossible. I will, in this lecture, and in the different parts of this lecture, is going to be an AB at least, or an ABC. I will argue to the contrary here, that he is defending maybe not rationality, but he is defending the very foundation of what it is to be a Westerner. And I would say that these professors of Cambridge, they are the very fanatical arch enemies of everything that is knowledge. And I would say that is, then my counter argument covers all of what they claim to be rationality. I don't say that Derrida don't attack rationality. Possible way of saying it could be many things, but he is defending much more. I think these professors are willing to give up the whole country and the world, the future of history and the future of our earth, to win a battle. And that battle are things that only these professors wants to prove and no one else. And they are each and one holding different opinions. They can't even themselves know what they are talking about. So far from being distinguished and honorable professors, these are charlatans, I would say. They are the absolute opposite of the uniforms they are wearing. And oddly enough, what they are saying is very new. It defies the history of Cambridge. They should never ever been appointed professor of Cambridge. Sorry, Derrida, may you rest in peace. I know you were way much too kind to utter these words and you would have felt them to be completely unnecessary. But I think a sharpening of argument is at place, because your very heritage, Jacques Derrida, is in peril. It's being attacked in a way it never have been before. And not by dusty old professors at Cambridge, but rather brilliant, very smart persons, admired by me as well, and most other people like Jordan Peterson are attacking you. And he doesn't have any reason to do so. All what he holds to be dear to him and dear to the future generations is something actually was defended by Derrida. Well, we continue in a bit. I better be off here. Okay, see you in a bit. Bye bye.